Welcome to Blind Level Tech. This isn't just accessible tech talk. This is technology on a whole new level. We're showing you just how possible it is to live the life you want.
Greetings, salutations, morning, afternoon, or evening, or whatever greeting you can conceptualize. Welcome to Blind Level Tech. I am your host, Evan Starnes. Thank you for bearing with me as I get some guests together, as I try and find some more topics, and I'm feeling a ton better than I did last week. So that, I think it's smooth sailing from here on out. And with that being said, I did want to at least throw in a quick little announcement regarding Aftersight and our social media presence first, mainly because we're finally on Mastodon and Blue Sky, and that is something that I've been trying to push for a little while now, especially since I've got on Mastodon. I remember a couple of years ago when Twitter rebranded. At least for me, what I saw was a lot of the community that I followed, the blind community as it were, kind of seemed to sort of migrate over to other platforms, including Mastodon. I don't think Blue Sky was out yet. But that being said, you can now follow Aftersight at mastodon.social. You can also find us on Blue Sky under Aftersight. And it's a great way to keep up with the latest in events and the latest in our podcasts. Go follow us on Mastodon. Goodness gracious, that shaky little intro aside, I am incredibly excited to have Paul Martz on. He actually was a volunteer on the tech team back in the days of AINC. He worked with Curtis Willoughby, who was... He did a lot with our old broadcast system and was very Linux savvy, and they worked a lot together. And he's also been an editor or an author on the Apple Viz forum, and he's a writer of a guidebook for Rubik's Cubes and a software developer. So Paul Martz, welcome to Blind Level Tech. Sorry about that shaky intro. I was hoping to have something better, but this is Blind Level Tech, so you never
Evan,
really know.
That was a great intro. Thank you so much. And it's just wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me as your guest.
Absolutely. And I said this before even we started to record. We're going to get into the weeds. This is definitely going to be a 2-part episode. So this first part, I would really like to focus mostly on, how you started as a professional Rubik's Cube solver. We use that term, I suppose. And what it's been like to adapt some of that stuff. But first, you began losing your vision at age 13 in 1976, and had always had kind of a thing, a love for technology, or at least a thing for it. So.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
The eyesight is kind of interesting. I have X-linked retinitis pigmentosa, and so a lot of family members are blind. And I very distinctly remember, sitting on my grandfather's lap at age 6 and talking to him about what he could and couldn't see. And he was down to light perception at that point, pretty much. And also going to family reunions. And at the family reunions, I just was surrounded by so many blind relatives, my mom's cousins and aunts and uncles, that I recognized early on that you didn't let blindness stop you. I still remember everyone just gathering for family reunions, just like the sighted people, and everyone stayed in contact and had a social life. My grandfather ran a farm. I distinctly remember watching him walk from the dairy barn back to the farmhouse with a bucket of milk in each hand. And so I had these very positive role models for blindness, and I never got the message that blindness should slow me down. Still, I would say, in a lot of ways, it did slow me down, especially when I got into my late teens and early 20s, a few years after the diagnosis, and I began to see how much of my social life was going to be spent in dim lighting conditions where I couldn't see, how problematic that was, or how uncomfortable it was for me to explain to a date that they would need to drive instead of me because we were going to be out late and I didn't drive after dark.
Mm-hmm.
So it had its challenges. And then into my early 20s, I know you wanted to talk about music a little bit too, but so I'll mention it right here. I was a drummer in a bar band, and I had to carry drum sets in and out of bars, and I had to sit around in a dark bar and socialize with people and talk the talk like I'm a big musician. And all the time I can't see any facial expressions, and I'm not getting any nonverbal cues. But the actual playing of the music was a lot of fun, aside from the fact that it blew my hearing out quite a bit too. So let's just fast forward quite a ways. You might want to go back and ask me details about the journey.
Oh, yeah.
Where I'm at today is I'm down to light perception. I can still see a little bit of light coming in a window, and I can make a guess as to which window that is and use that to navigate inside my own house. But I am rapidly losing that ability.
Absolutely.
And as far as my hearing goes, I function as hearing with aids. I had a pair of Costco hearing aids that I bought 8 years ago. I've now actually, I'm calling it an upgrade. I have the AirPods Pro 2 when they came out last fall, and those actually provide superior performance to the Costco hearing aids that I used to have.
And that is definitely something that we will be touching on in part 2. You actually gave us quite a lot to touch on. And if you'd like to hear more,
Sorry.
No, I don't know why you're sorry. Like this is the type of podcast that we go for, a conversational. We're not on NPR. Just got to remember that here.
Excellent. Then I can be disorganized. Thank you.
I'm
Appreciate
already,
that freedom.
it actually helps me because I'm a very back and forth. My brain works like a washing machine on agitation. So,
Excellent.
But you played some of my favorite, at least music growing up. You played punk and what would we now consider like alternative rock, which is pretty cool.
Right.
And
yep. Some of my favorite bands at the time were The Cure,
Yep.
early albums by The Cure, Joy Division,
I think of some.
U2's first couple albums, Romeo Void. One of the first punk rock concerts I went to was a British band called Gang of Four.
Ooh.
Opening for them was Pall, which was a band out of Athens, Georgia,
Oh, I like
which of
Pall.
course is where REM and B-52s came from. So,
Have you heard of the Dropkick Murphys? Just out of chance?
Dropkick Murphys, no, but I love the name.
Yeah, they're an Irish band. In fact, if you ever remember the old Irish, it's that beer commercial, and it had the, I don't know, the song's playing in the back of my head. It's, either way, it's like very Irish influenced rock, and it's amazing. And it's they're, as far as that genre, among my favorites. But let's kind of dive into your very, very first exposure with computers in the first place. I imagine you probably got to experience things like the Apple II or the Commodore 64. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like, when did you first get to mess with a computer?
I was in 8th grade, growing up in Flint, Michigan, and our junior high school got teletype terminals. And,
Oh, yeah.
And these are these horrendously noisy things with a print ball and a big roll of white paper and a shoebox size modem, and you dialed up the main computer with your black rotary phone and shoved the handset into the modem.
Yep.
And they were using those to drill students on math problems from the elementary school next door. Kids would come over to the junior high and they would sit down at the computers and drill on math problems. I wanted immediately to learn how to program them. I'm 14 at this point. To rewind back to age 6, my dad took me to see 2001: A Space Odyssey on the big screen.
Yeah.
And of course, the HAL 9000 just stole my heart. I walked out of that movie theater and I knew I wanted to program computers for the rest of my life. I didn't even know what that meant. So by the time I'm 14 in junior high and we've got these teletypes, myself and a couple of other nerd friends decided that we were going to figure out on our own how to teach ourselves how to program because none of the faculty or staff had been trained to do anything other than drill elementary students on math problems. And so we just started staying after school and figuring it out. So that was kind of my earliest fiddling around with computers. The neat thing about Flint school systems is they partnered with the surrounding schools in Genesee County, Michigan, to fund a vocational school. So in 11th and 12th grade, I was actually able to take a class in accounting and business data processing. So we had a mini computer and were given instruction on BASIC and COBOL in high school.
Nice.
So the smaller microcomputers were starting to come out. I didn't actually get my hands on those until I was in college. So in the early 80s, this was kind of the IBM PC and PC clone.
Yep.
There was an Apple II I remember getting my hands on in college. It was 1984 was when the Apple Mac came out. And 1985 was when I graduated. So I graduated right into the middle of the microcomputer revolution, where the start of the decade, everybody had typewriters in their office. And the end of the decade, everyone was running WordPerfect and Lotus 1-2-3.
And people were still using dumb terminals too, because I mean, you had I'm surprised you got to mess with teletypes, because I know they stuck around until like the early 70s. You know, there's makers like DEC that made those. And then eventually, you know, we got to the dumb terminals, just like a keyboard with a black and white monitor. Did they ever make a talking dumb terminal? Because I've always wanted to know that, and I've never had a clear answer.
I don't know. I was functioning as a sighted person at that point.
Oh, I see.
And actually, I found light text on a black background easier to view. And when the Apple Macintosh came out with black on white, I thought that was just a horrible decision. And most of my computer nerds that are all, you know, green or amber on black, they all kind of felt the same way, even though they were all fully sighted. But myself, as someone who had already lost a little bit of eyesight and was clearly going to lose more, I didn't like the trend of black on white.
Yeah,
so as my eyesight progressed, I started finding ways to customize the color scheme. Whenever I would get a new computer and those settings allowed it, be it Windows or a Linux system or Unix or whatever I was working on, I would go into settings, I would get white text on a black background. Just so much more comfortable to look at.
No, absolutely. And later on, you began a career at HP, and that, correct me if I'm wrong, led to you eventually using things like JAWS and eventually, you know, switching over to the good old Mac with VoiceOver. How did that all start out in the first place?
Yeah, I started working at HP after about 10 years into my career. This was about 1995, and that was at the Hewlett-Packard site in Fort Collins, Colorado. So I'm now, at this point, in my early 30s. Gosh, it just seems like those restaurants that we go out to lunch to are so dim, right?
Yes.
If they would just turn up the light a little bit, it'd be so much easier to read the menu, or maybe I wouldn't have to follow somebody to find the door after we're done eating. Maybe I'd be able to walk out myself. That was kind of what I was experiencing at that point. Things were getting severe. And I distinctly remember at one point walking around this enormous complex, you know, tens of thousands of square feet, massive cubicle farms, rounding a corner and running just face first into a coworker who was there. And it wasn't like they were coming around the corner too. They were a good distance away. So I had rounded the corner and I had plenty of time to see them, and I just didn't. And we ran right into each other. That was one of two or three little incidents that all kind of happened back to back, where I realized I can either walk a lot slower and be a lot more careful, or I can just get my cane, you know, screw it, screw what people think. I want to keep moving and be as as efficient and as productive as every single one of my coworkers. And the only way I'm going to do that is if I accept that I'm losing my eyesight, get my cane out, take that big giant step, set my ego aside, and then everyone will get out of my way when I'm coming down the hallway.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely.
And so that actually started to solve a lot of problems for me. And Hewlett-Packard was very supportive of me through that, encouraged me to, yes, go ahead and adapt the cane, and we will support you. If, my direct manager is saying that he would support me in case anyone had any questions, he would back me up. That was great. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. And they also said, you might want to consider this new thing called JAWS that's just came out. We hear all the blind people are using it, and they bought me a copy without me even asking for it, and said, "Here, try it out. Let us know whether it works or not." And it was more than I needed, more help than I needed at that point. Everyone sees you pick up the cane, they think you just went totally blind, right?
Yeah, and it's a blanket statement. They treat it like
exactly, and in fact, it was much more of a gradual decline for me. So I did not need to suddenly start using a screen reader. But opening up that box and seeing the Braille instructions inside and installing it and playing around and reading through some of the documentation, I learned that I needed to start using some of the built-in keyboard shortcuts every chance I got. So Control B for bold, Control I for italic, instead of going to the menus. Control S for save. For any of those kind of operations where things were built in, just go ahead and start using those now, because when my eyesight was gone and I really did need the software, I was going to be depending on that.
Yes.
So that was a positive step for me, even though I didn't actually start using JAWS in 1996.
Gotcha. Keyboard shortcuts are one of those things that once you really get the hang of them, you can almost be more efficient than somebody with a mouse, I think.
I think so. I love, my hands are on the keyboard anyway. I'm typing code or I'm editing code. And so why should I need to take them away just to access a menu?
Exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that you can even set your own really handy, on Windows, you can set alt control shortcuts to run applications. And if you're a voiceover user and you haven't messed around with the voiceover commander, you're very much missing out. It's incredibly cool to be able to set, right Command M to open mail or whatever it is. They're a very amazing thing. And I've got to ask, because, this is the mid 90s and JAWS is pretty early on, and we're still pretty early in the days of software based synthesizers like Eloquence. Were you using just a standard sound card? Did you actually have a physical hardware synthesizer, like an Accent or a double talk? Do you remember?
I would have been using a standard sound card or whatever was built into the motherboard. But,
gotcha.
At that point in my career at HP, I had two computers on my desk. One was my, was Windows NT out at that point?
Yep, it was. Sure Windows NT came out, I think, 1996, actually.
Yep. So that was kind of my home computer that I was doing my email and my web browsing. The internet was there too.
Yeah, totally. Dial-up was.
I lose track of the order these things all came out, these developments.
Mm-hmm.
But, word processing, email, my home computer, right? My second computer was an HP UX workstation that I was doing my software development on. And of course, there's no screen reader on that anyway. But the Windows PC did have a speaker, and the robot voice, JAWS robot voice at that time, reminded me very much of the old Red Dwarf computer or AI and the old Red Dwarf TV show from BBC, I think.
Yeah, I have yet to see that. I think I was thinking more of the computer from the movie War Games. But have you seen that movie?
Did that one speak?
That one did speak, and it sounded like this, and it kind of it was actually one of my favorite. It was made by a person. It wasn't an actual synthesizer, but really, really good mock-up of one, especially for 1983 or something like that. Gosh, that movie's. I can't believe how old that movie is and how. But
I can't believe how much I've forgotten about it.
Well, to avoid diverting topics here, I'd really like to first, how did you actually get into Rubik's Cubes and kind of what started that whole endeavor?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of twists and turns in that story,
Pun intended.
but as a kid, I grew up in a house where my mom always had some kind of craft project going or jigsaw puzzle going or something. She was a stay-at-home mom, and she did things to keep herself occupied and use her brain a lot. And one of the things was jigsaw puzzles, and I would often help her out. I'd help her find a piece and find a place for a piece. So I loved puzzles. Logic puzzles. My parents got me word searches and crossword puzzles and logic puzzle books as a kid, and I enjoyed those as well. Brain teasers, basically. And then around 1980, when I was 17, the Rubik's Cube came out, and it was produced by the Ideal Toy Company. They did a tremendous over-the-top marketing campaign. They basically injected this thing into popular culture.
Yes.
And popular culture devoured it. It was an enormous phenomenon, and for the entire decade and beyond, probably. So I was suckered right into the marketing hype. I had to get one as soon as I could find one. So back in those days, they were department stores, and I'd go shopping with my parents, and I'd check the toy department, and there it was, Rubik's Cube. I'm breaking it open in my piggy bank, and yeah, so I had my eyesight and was able to start tinkering around with it as a sighted kid. And it was very addicting. At that point, there was no internet where you could look up a solution.
Yeah, you just figured it out.
The first guidebooks hadn't even been put out yet. So I bravely scrambled it and started playing with it. And a few of my nerdy friends also had Rubik's Cubes. And we started to, swap notes. Oh, you can do this. Oh, you can look what I can do. And pretty soon we had worked out a solution on our own. So no one does that anymore. Nobody pioneers their own solution anymore. This is the 21st century. Today, anyone can just look up a solution on the internet. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute because I want to take a pit stop 10 years ago when my eyesight was seriously tanking and I realized that I wasn't going to be able to solve a Rubik's Cube sighted anymore. I bought a tactile cube. And those are actually surprisingly easy to find with a web search. You just search for tactile cube. They're available at Amazon, Independent Living Aids, etc. And I started playing around with that, and I realized that I could solve that without even looking at it. So that was kind of a neat trick. And then I set it on a shelf and let it gather dust for a few years. Mm-hmm. So then flash forward to just a few years ago, maybe 2022 or so, I wanted to solve that cube again, but I'd forgotten how to do it. So I started to get on the web to look, and all the instructions were visual in nature. Nothing was accessible. There were videos where the audio track would tell me, if you want to move this piece here, you just turn this, this, and this, which is not helpful.
Not at all.
And a lot of the web pages were the same. They were visual diagrams or images. I was just looking at one before I got into this recording session with you. Exact same thing from a person who claims to be producing cube information that is accessible, and yet they have these non-described images. So,
and not exactly accessible.
Right. As a tech writer, and now I've skipped over a whole bunch.
No, that's okay.
But I had been writing blogs for AppleBiz for a number of years. And programming books before that. As a tech writer, I said, this is a problem that I can fix. And that has always been the goal with my Rubik's Cube book that I've just recently put out, is to fill a documentation hole and give blind people access to the same information that sighted people can absorb with a glance.
Gotcha. And Rubik's Cubes are one of those things that you can really, really, once you get into the nitty gritty of it, I mean, there's straight up, they got competitions. They have actual competitive grade Rubik's Cubes and like specific timers for Rubik's Cube solving. And I guess a couple of questions. First of all, what's the difference between a speed Rubik's Cube, a competitive one, versus just your bog standard or even your adaptive Rubik's Cubes? And how did you go about using 3D printing to adapt those Rubik's Cubes?
Right. So first, let's just talk about the cubes designed for sighted people.
Yes.
Those will come in two varieties. One is your basic Rubik's brand, which is not sold for people who are competing. It's kind of sold as a novelty toy product.
Yeah.
And the internal mechanisms on those things are really rough and very, very tight. And there's an enormous amount of friction there. So turning them, once you've used a speed cube, if you're using a standard Rubik's Cube, it feels like you're driving a Mack truck.
Wow.
So, and then the speed cube, on the other hand, that's like driving a Lamborghini, right? This thing flies. It's all lubricated, internally engineered. It's got magnets so that you can flick aside with one finger and it'll rotate and snap into place, and you can immediately go to the next rotation. They have magnetized washers on the screws so that your sides have a little bit of sponginess up and down to help them lock into place a little bit better. Some of them have actual springs in there. You can take them apart, remove the magnets, and swap in different magnets if you want more or less magnetic attraction on your rotations. So they're customizable. They're amazing little devices. They're very well engineered.
Yeah.
So now what do you do if you're a blind person? Because you don't want, the standard commercial cube, and you don't want the standard speed cube, because you need to have some kind of tactile way to identify by touch the colors that a sighted person sees with their own eyes.
Yes, and not putting it at a speed disadvantage either.
Right. So you can buy a tactile cube. Most of the tactile cubes that are pre-made tactile are not speed cubes. So those are kind of commercial novelty cubes.
Standard ones, yep.
And that's still a good way to learn. If you want that for your first cube, don't let that stop you. Don't let that slow you down. Mm-hmm. But if you buy a speed cube for a sighted person, you're going to need to customize it yourself. One real easy way that any blind person can do this is with the same kind of bump dots we use to mark the start button on a microwave. You simply need 45 markings. You need 5 of the same type of marking, and you need 9 each of those 5. And then you need to cover 5 sides of your cube, and you need to leave the 6th side with no markings at all. But what I do is I have worked with friends who have their own 3D printer, and they've created custom tactile markings for me. And this is better than bump dots, because with bump dots, I find that I just don't have the control over the shape and the texture of the dot that I want. Some are gloss, some are sticky, some are really big, some are kind of really small. With a 3D printer, I can get squares, circles, filled squares, open circles, filled circles, plus signs,
stars,
and they're all about the same dimension and the same height off the cube once they're super glued down to the surface. So it feels better on my fingers. And then I'm going to mention yet another option, because now that I've actually published this book, someone has reached out to me and said, hey, guess what? I have just also launched my own store, and I'm selling. It's texturecube.com. So they make their own, starting with a speed cube, they apply their own textures, and they're actually quite attractive to look at. So if you want something that not only feels good, that you can identify with your own fingers and solve as a blind person, but also looks really freaking cool, I would go to texturecube.com and order one of their products.
That's good to know. And we will definitely be sure to put that website in the show notes for our listeners here. And I was going to ask, how would somebody that's blind really do 3D printing? Because I've talked to people that have done it. In fact, a guy, Tom Babinski, that does 3D mock-ups of buildings. I just don't know.
The type of programming that I used to specialize in back when I programmed was 3D graphics. And in particular, I worked a lot with the engineering market. So we were using a lot of high-end modeling software like 3D Studio Max or PTC Pro Engineer. And that was all done very visually, of course. And that's one reason I got out of programming. because once I lost my eyesight, I couldn't work with those types of application software anymore. But Tinkercad is one piece of software that I hear a lot of people in the cubing community use. And they will design cube parts, or for me, textured add-ons to modify a cube. And then they send those shape files to a 3D printer to print them. So I don't think that I can use that software anymore. But I did just discover when I had ChatGPT open that I could ask it to create a shape file for me that could be sent to a 3D printer. So I'm going to have to start working on the prompts for that. I haven't explored it too deeply, but just in a brief conversation, would you be able to print a shape file for me for a plus sign at a specific dimensions in millimeters? Oh, yes, Paul, I would be able to do that. I would use 2 bars, one in the x-axis, one in the y, and they would have, so much width and girth. And then I would spit out this file for you, and you would copy it and paste it into something and send it to your printer, and boom. But that looks very promising, and I'll have to play with that a little bit.
Yeah, ChatGPT, I don't know why I don't consider that as an option more, because, I've seen people use it to help start coding projects or to come up. I mean, mostly what I use it for is just brainstorming and making my rambly technical emails less rambly and technical because that's how they can be. Yeah. But I wouldn't, that makes sense though, because even being able to ask it to make a very specific dimensioned, I don't know, a 3D printed phone case or just whatever you could conceptualize, as long as you can put it into words and ChatGPT can spit the file out.
Exactly, as long as you can describe it. And what I found is that the shape file it puts out is an ASCII text description, almost like an XML kind of language. So I could arrow through that and make sure that it really is giving me what I asked for. And that's kind of the same approach I would use if I were having it generate, say, some WordPress code for me. If I were having it help me with a WordPress plugin, I would arrow through it and say, well, this isn't quite what I want. Can you, make such and such change? And I've had some luck with that, actually.
Yeah, definitely.
But it's a new way of thinking about both programming and 3D modeling. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's that whole concept of how can you integrate artificial intelligence, large language models into your workflows to not do the work for you necessarily, but help you become more efficient at what you work with.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yeah. It's a new age.
Now, circling back, we're almost actually at the end of part 1 here, but I did want to ask the question, what other ways do you feel like 3D printing as a whole could be used just in everyday life to make things more adaptive, do you think?
That's a good question.
It's loaded.
I really kind of feel bad that I missed out on the 3D printing revolution, because if I had one and I'd been playing around with it, I'd be prepared to answer that question. But I will say that the first person who created tactile markings for a Rubik's Cube for me threw in, as a bonus, free, a cube holder. So you kind of like set your cube 2 opposite corners in at an angle, almost like a globe on a tilted axis, and you can push your cube around and spin it. It's really quite cool. And at the base of that little cube holder, they put my name, Paul, in Braille. And that was all 3D printed. They didn't do anything other than just create the dots in their model file. So I thought that was kind of cool.
That is really cool. And a lot of people don't realize that you can 3D print Braille. And I did get to, at least in high school, kind of experience that revolution of 3D printing. I remember when we got a MakerBot Replicator 5, that thing was like, we got it from a grant because it was like $5,000 or $6,000. Crazy expensive. Nowadays, you can go to Micro Center and buy a 3D printer for like $200. Not a very good one, but you can buy it. But I remember making models for biology class of like DNA with the different pieces and parts laid out with Braille on the tops of them, so I could figure out what piece it was.
How cool is that? So that a blind person can actually feel the structure with their hands, right?
Yeah, and put it together like a puzzle.
Nice.
Yeah, it was super cool, and I remember that same. This was back in the days too, and I was a big Android snob, so I'm not that now. My teacher had made me like an Android robot keychain and a phone case and a phone stand. I mean, just whatever you can conceptualize. I mean, we're getting so close to Star Trek replicators. It's not even funny at this point.
I definitely want it. I wonder if I could print my own cane tip when I wear out my cane tip.
You probably could. I mean, especially nowadays that you can 3D print with metal. I think that's even more feasible than it was before.
It's got to be the material, right? If you use the standard, whatever they call it, PLA, that you may as well not even bother because it would just wear out too fast. It's got to be something serious.
Yeah, and it'll get kind of stringy. But I mean, now they're making it so you can 3D print with wood and rubber and metal. I mean, hey, we're going to get to glass eventually, but
that's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining me for part 1 of your episode on, well, we're just going to call this Into the Weeds with Paul Martz because I don't know what else to call it. And I like that phrasing. So, but yeah, thank you so much for joining me. In part 2, we're going to talk more about some of the tech that you use every single day and how it is integrated into your life, including stuff that you touched on like the AirPods. So definitely stay tuned. We'll have a sandwich for you. And with that being said, if you've got any feedback or questions or comments for us podcast hosts here at Aftersight, send us an email at feedback@aftersight.org or leave us a voicemail at 720-712-8856. And Paul, we love our plugs here. So just so that people can get their hands on your book, where can people find you and your book?
Very good. Thank you. Yes, you can go to my author website, which is paulmartz.com, and you'll find a buy link for the book. We should mention the name of the book. It's quite a mouthful. Mm-hmm. Solve It! The only speed-solving guide for blind cubers. So paulmartz.com is where you'll go to find the buy link for that. And you can also go to the book's companion website, which is tactilecuber.com.
That's awesome. And we'll definitely have all of those links in the show notes for your convenience, and strongly encourage you to check them out and go check out Paul's book. Even if you have maybe thought about grabbing a Rubik's Cube or thought it's definitely a fun hobby and a fun competitive thing that you can do. I've got one on my desk that my cousin, who is actually getting into competitive Rubik's Cube solving, he solved it for me, and it's still sitting solved on my desk, and I haven't touched it since. Because I found it at the mall a few years ago and played around with it, handed it to him, and he was like, "Oh, I'll solve it." 40 seconds later, he hands it to me, like, solved. Yeah, this guy, he listens to the podcast too, so I'm sure he'll get plenty of enjoyment out of this. But anyway, thank you so much, Paul, for joining us. We definitely hope you enjoyed listening to this episode. I have been your host, Evan Starnes. Stay tuned for part 2, then we'll catch you guys again next week.